Howdy! Welcome to episode 43 of the See-Through Podcast, a weekly podcast that creates transparency on disabilities and the champions with them. I'm your host, Lance Johnson, and I live, create, and podcast from Brooklyn, New York with an inherited retinal disease called retinitis pigmentosa, or RP for short. If you're new to this podcast, welcome. I'm super stoked you're here, and you picked a great day to listen to this podcast. Today's guest is a name widely known in the visually impaired community. Today's guest is Sam Seavey, the YouTuber behind the channel The Blind Life. The Blind Life is a YouTube channel that currently has over 32,000 subscribers and boasts over 560 videos covering a wide variety of topics for those affected by vision loss. In his videos, Sam tries to show the humorous side of life with low vision while also sharing many tips and tricks that he's learned over the last 30 years. So if you're an avid YouTube watcher like I am, or you're an aspiring YouTuber, this episode is definitely for you. In this episode, Sam and I talk about his life living with Stargardt's disease, the origins of his YouTube channel, his custom studio setup, how he films and edits his videos, his glass half full approach to life, his family life, and more. But before you hear my conversation with Sam, do me a huge favor and follow or subscribe to this podcast on the platform you're currently listening on. Also, make sure to follow the See-Through Podcast on social media. The handle is at See-Through-Pod, and that covers Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. It's much appreciated. Well, that's it for Sam's intro. Let's dig into this episode. Here's episode 43 featuring my conversation with Sam Seavey. Sam, what's up, man? Thanks for talking with me.
Hey, Lance. Yeah, my pleasure, man. I'm honored that you invited me.
Well, I had to, man. I had to because I saw your Beacon story and I was blown away by it. And not only that, but Peter, who's the video director of those Beacon stories, whenever he was filming mine, he couldn't stop hyping your video up. So there was just a lot of hype around it. In fact, Peter, he was my last guest last week, actually, on this podcast.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I was going to ask. So I saw yours too. Yours just released recently and I watched it. Fantastic job.
Thanks,
man. A lot
man.
of great information in there. I was going to ask if it was Peter also that recorded yours. So that's pretty cool. He was great. He was very professional and but just a really cool guy.
Yeah, he was. I figured it'd be cool to have him on because he kind of has this like outsider's perspective.
Right.
You know, doing these videos, and he also does work for Two Blind Brothers. So It was an interesting episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I'm excited to talk to you because, you know, it's kind of similar to why I was excited to talk and meet Peter is, you know, we have similar hobbies. You know, you have a YouTube channel, The Blind Life. If you're listening, I'll have a link in the show description that'll take you there, but it's youtube.com/theblindlife.
Right.
You create all these videos with your visual impairment. You live with Stargardt's disease, right?
Yes. Yep. So Stargardt's disease, for anyone that's not aware, juvenile form of macular degeneration, in the basic explanation of it. So I don't have any central vision, just peripheral, which is opposite of you, I guess, right? We're kind of cousins, RP and Stargardt's, right?
Yeah, I know. When I interviewed the Two Blind Brothers, they said that when you put us together, we have perfect vision.
Right.
We're a perfect team, you know, which I thought was pretty funny.
Or terrible vision. I guess it depends on which way you go.
Yeah. It could work for driving, you know, one's in the driver's seat, one's in the passenger seat, you know.
Yeah. It always makes it, I think of those old like kids movies where the kids take the car out and one is down there working the pedals while the other's up there steering. It's like we'd have to do some kind of cooperation like that.
Yeah, that's a funny picture, man. But yeah, I have a lot to talk to you about, and I think it would be wise to, you know, let's give the listeners a quick setup of you and who you are, where you live, what you're doing, and then we can move on from there.
Sure. Yeah. So I currently live in Central Kentucky, and I'm an import though. I'm originally from North Carolina and actually lived all up and down the East Coast pretty much my whole life, all the way from Maryland down to Florida. But moved here a while ago and met my wife, had a family, that tale as old as time. But yeah, as I mentioned, Stargardt's, I was diagnosed at age 11, so started losing my sight gradually from that point. Legally blind by my mid-teens, was never able to legally drive. When I turned 16, I got a moped though. My parents were awesome. They were so supportive. And my dad's like, yeah, you want a moped? Yeah, let's get a moped. That'll be great. So I went at that point, I was all over the city, riding around. I definitely couldn't do it now. My vision's way too bad right now. But I did get a little bit of taste of freedom with that regard. But I currently work as an assistive technology program coordinator at a nonprofit here in Kentucky. So I work weekly with clients, usually older clients losing vision later in life. Age-related macular degeneration is probably the number one we see. Kentucky is number one, I guess, in the nation for diabetes. And so we get some diabetic retinopathy as well. And it's unfortunate, but I say, hey, at least we're number one in something, right? Let's look at the positive side. And so that's kind of helped guide the content on my channel. And so started my YouTube channel in 2013 and has just been growing like a weed ever since. And focusing mainly on assistive technology now, although the channel is called The Blind Life because that's what it is. It's a channel about my blind life. It's a channel about your blind life, everyone's blind life, and showing people how to live the best blind life they can. I do focus heavily on assistive technology because that's what I do. That's what I know. That's what I love. And because of that, I think arguably my channel has become the number one resource for information about assistive technology for the visually impaired on the internet. So if anyone's ever thinking about picking something up, they're curious about a new device, they can head on over to my channel, do a search, and chances are I've got an honest review video about that.
That's amazing. Yeah, I saw on your website you described your channel as the best place on the internet to learn about assistive technology. And I was like, okay, I like that. I like that, And
yeah, like I said, there's no studies or anything to back that up. I was like, the web guy's like, we need something here. I was like, all right, put this.
But yeah, your channel is great. It has over 560 videos and you have over 32,000 subscribers. And you cover a wide variety of topics, and I think anyone listening would absolutely get a lot out of visiting your channel. So again, if you're listening, just click the show description, check out his YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And you mentioned you're from North Carolina. I'm from North Carolina.
Oh, fellow Carolinian.
Yeah, I grew up in Hope Mills, North Carolina. It's right outside of Fayetteville.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. One of the smaller towns, I guess.
Yeah. Small town.
Yeah. I'm originally from Raleigh, but I lived all over. I lived in Rocky Mount, lived in Charlotte.
Okay.
Yeah, we traveled around a lot growing up.
Before I moved to New York, I was living in Raleigh. I lived in Raleigh for around 3 years. And I wanted to bring something up because I can't remember where I read it, but I read that you went to the Governor Moorhead School for the Blind.
Yeah. So I went through public schools pretty much my whole school career. When I lived in Rocky Mount for a short time, I was at a private school, but between my junior and senior year, I did a summer program at the Governor Moorhead School, and I just fell in love with it. I loved it. It was, growing up visually impaired, especially when you're the only one probably in your school who's visually impaired. It's very isolating. I've always had a very positive attitude about life in general, maybe not about my vision loss, especially at that time, but I try to look at the glasses half full kind of side of things.
Yeah.
But, when you're the kid in the classroom sitting in the front row because they want to try and get you as close to the board as possible, and you're using the monocular and you've got the large print books, and this was back before the kids could have all their books on an iPad or something.
Yeah.
It's very segregating. And so despite how positive you try and look at it, it's tough growing up that way. So when I went to this school for the first time, Governor Moorhead School for the Blind, I was finally around kids that were like myself. I was finally found my true peer group. And in fact, I could actually see better than most of the kids there. So I was actually the cool guy that could see really well for like the first time ever. So it was just awesome. So when I got back after that summer program, I asked my parents if I could finish up my senior year there. And like I said before, my parents were awesome. They said, yeah, whatever you need, let's do it. So I did. So I only went there for 1 year, but I had a blast.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that got me excited because I used to live around where that school is, and I used to take my dog on a walk. And I would constantly, like, regularly walk past this school, you know, and as someone with RP, I always looked at it and like, oh, that's interesting. Like, I wonder what kind of classes go on there, like age groups. And I don't know, I always had this kind of curiosity around the school because I walked past it all the time. And it just kind of felt like one of those, like, it's a small world type of moments when I read that you went there.
Yeah. So that means you walked past the prison that was right next door as well, right?
Oh, yeah, I walked past the prison. In fact, I could see the prison from my apartment window.
Oh, I tell you, and I tell the story. I've done videos about the school, and I tell the story in the videos that there was this little side street that was still on school property, but it was right next to the fence of the outer fence of this prison.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a big prison because it was right in the middle of downtown Raleigh, but the inmates would yell at you from the windows as you walk down the street. It's like, this is my life. I live with a bunch of blind kids right next to a prison, and these hardened criminals are yelling not nice things, honestly. It was fun.
It prepared you for the real world.
Yeah, the mean streets of Raleigh, North Carolina.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that's just a cool coincidence I wanted to kind of just briefly bring up because I thought it was neat.
That is cool, yeah.
But yeah, I want to go back to your YouTube channel because, you know, I'm a video editor and that's how I, you know, pay my bills and whatnot. And seeing your Beacon story, I loved hearing about your studio setup and how you have a monitor and how you use your monitor to check for exposure. It's kind of larger than average. And then you also edit your videos based off of the audio waveform, and it makes total sense to me, but I have to admit that is like an out of the ordinary approach to editing. You just kind of watch the video and make cuts as needed, but you know what's I find amazing about that is that you were clever and you just adapted to it and you're editing with waveform. And I want to talk about that because since I started this podcast and I'm dealing, because I don't do video currently, I just do audio episodes. I've been able to kind of look at waveforms and understand things a lot better actually than I did before doing this podcast. I can see like, oh, that's probably an you know, you know, I can see these pauses and I can tell like if it's a pause with someone's thinking. And I've kind of been able to pick up on these kind of waveform cues. So whenever I saw your video and how you edit based off of the waveform, I was like, it makes total sense. So I wanted to talk to you about that. How did you figure that out?
Well, it was just, you know, it was born out of necessity, really. For people that aren't familiar, so when you're looking at your editing program, there's several different sections on there. Usually you have a preview window, and then you have your timeline at the bottom. And someone with average sight can look at everything all at once and kind of glance around the screen. Okay, I need to watch the preview while I'm doing the playback, and then I can look down and make the cut on the timeline and look back up and make sure it's good. I can't do that because I'm zoomed in. I'm using screen magnification. And so I'm only seeing a very small section of the screen at any one given time. And I do have the ability to kind of zip back and forth between the preview and the timeline and all that. But everyone who edits knows that it's all about the workflow. It's all about getting this done as quickly as possible because time is money. And so I don't want to spend extra time zipping all around the screen if I don't have to. So I try to, as you said, I've got my studio set up and I've got a mounted camera. And I should also mention that I have videos on all of this. I've got videos showing how I record videos, how I edit. I've got a video on how to make YouTube videos and how to make a YouTube channel with low vision. And I give tips and tricks on how to record yourself. And even if you can't see the camera, you can't see the back of the camera, that sort of thing. So I set up my studio with a mounted camera. It's always mounted. I have a couple cameras that I use, and I've got one that I've got it always mounted on this camera arm that's attached to my desk with my lighting setup. So it never changes. This setup never changes. So I don't have to worry about setting up the shot every single time. And then I have that camera connected to a big 32-inch TV, Samsung TV. I love Samsung TVs. And it's close enough to touch. It's about 2 feet away from me, but I can't read anything on it. It has my camera settings and everything are displayed on there. And I still have to lean in super close to see those. But it's big enough that I can make sure that I'm centered in the shots. I can make sure that my head isn't being cut off somehow. I can make sure that, as you said, the exposure, my lighting is bright enough and all that. Generally, I don't have to worry about that because my setup doesn't change. But I can do all that before getting into the post-processing procedures, so that it helps when I down the road. It helps stuff that I don't have to worry about in the editing program. But when I edit, I bring in my clip, and the first thing I do is I frame up the clip. I get my composition correct, because I record wide. I record my shots wider than I want them.
Yeah.
Because I know that I'm not going to be able to line it up perfectly in camera. So I know that I'm going to have a little bit of wiggle room in the editing software. I get that done first. Then I do my color correction, which is kind of opposite. Most editors color correct at the end of the edit.
Yeah.
But I do mine first because once again, I don't want to deal with that at the end. It's not as easy. It's easier for me personally to do it right then. And I use DaVinci Resolve. DaVinci Resolve is great because, and some other programs, Premiere might have this also, I'm not sure, but DaVinci Resolve has an auto color correction where it does its best to make it look as good as it thinks it should. And it's actually pretty good. So most times I just use that. I might bring up the contrast. I might bring up the sharpness, because with low vision, contrast is king. Contrast is super important. And so I tend to make my videos a little extra contrasty to make them easier to see for my audience. And then I know that my positioning is good. I know that all of this is good. So I don't need to watch the preview as I'm editing. I can just focus on that waveform. And as you said, I know that if there's a big gap in the audio, well, that's a part where I was kind of gathering my thoughts, and I can just cut that out. I cut out the ums and the ahs. My timeline looks like a barcode at the end because there's so many cuts.
Yes, yeah.
It makes me sound super eloquent, at the end, and like I'm super articulate, but I'm really not in real life. So I have to cut all that stuff out. Like I said, that's the workflow that works the best for me. It's not what everybody does, but I found that it works the best.
Yeah, it's a great workflow, and I love hearing you describe it. I'm gonna have to go check out your YouTube videos on that, because I'm gearing up to start producing videos for this podcast, and I'm gonna be kind of making my own little home studio.
Oh yeah.
So I'm gonna try to have like a really streamlined workflow. And you know what you brought up, sounding eloquent. That's kind of one thing I'm nervous about, because right now doing audio episodes, I can cut all my ums and all that out. And I'm like, video might shine a different light on my the lack of grammar I have. And
right.
But yeah, hopefully I sound decent when I switch to video.
That's what I say. Well, for me, it's the opposite. It's when I do live events or podcasts like this that people see the glimpse of the guy behind the curtain, and it's like, wow, he actually says and ah a lot more than he does in his videos. That's because I cut all that stuff out.
Yeah. Yeah, because podcasting is such a free-flowing conversation, versus I'm assuming sometimes for your videos, do you script a lot of what you're going to write and say?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't. And that's something else that separates me from a lot of other YouTubers. I totally wish I could write up a script and I could have it on a teleprompter right behind the camera. That would make it so much easier.
Yeah.
So much easier. But I don't have that luxury. So sometimes if it's an important video, if it's an important topic, or if I'm being commissioned to make a video for something, I will write down the talking points, and maybe I'll have on my phone or an iPad next to me, and I'll as I'm going along, I'll play the talking points and then I'll say what I want to say about that. But no, pretty much 99.9% of what I'm doing is just unscripted. I'm just sitting there talking. I think that's kind of what a lot of people like about my channel, is because I've heard many people say that it sounds like I'm just sitting there next to them talking right to them. I don't have that cheesy radio voice. Hey guys, today we're blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
Uh, and I leave in the mistakes. When I say something that makes me laugh, I'll leave in the laugh. It just because it's all about being genuine. But it also comes with experience. That's something else I hear people say, and which you incidentally I think will have no problem, because you already had the experience set up, that the more you do these things, the better you get, the more natural you sound, the more natural the flow is, all of that. So I definitely encourage you to do the videos. That's a really cool aspect of podcasts now, is people, when they release the videos of them. I love watching those things just as much as listening to the podcast. So I think it'd be a great idea. And if you need any pointers or any help, just let me know.
Oh, I'll definitely reach out, man. And yeah, I'm excited to do video. It's something I've been wanting to do since I started this thing, honestly, but I've been kind of slowly acquiring equipment and getting a space set up for it, because I want it to look nice. I'm kind of a perfectionist, so
I understand.
Whereas right now you would just see like a white wall behind me in my bedroom. and you can see my mattress in the background. Like, I'm in a tiny New York apartment, so it's like, it's not the best visual setting, but I'm going to figure something out. Yeah, that's awesome. And, your audio sounds great too. So I'm assuming that you've just kind of feel like a video production professional now. You got visuals down, you're working with cameras, you have a monitor, you even are using DaVinci Resolve, you got different microphones, and then you also, you're reviewing tech. So it seems like you're a very tech savvy individual. Have you always been that way?
I think so. I've always used assistive technology ever since I was in elementary, and then middle school. We had a CCTV in the library, and I would go down and use it. I had a TVI that would come, a teacher of the visually impaired, that would come to my school once a week and work with me. And then, of course, when smartphones came out, I always had to have the coolest one, driving my wife crazy, but I always had to have the newest and the best, a little bit of a sense of pride with me. And I always, whenever I got those things, I always wanted to modify it and make it cooler than it already was.
Okay.
I was never happy. I was never satisfied with the way it was. And I think that's unfortunately has definitely carried over into my YouTube. And, you can ask my wife. I'm a bit of a perfectionist with this stuff. If I'm not happy with the video quality, it drives me crazy, and I will kind of obsess about it. How can I improve it? How can I improve my color grade? Meanwhile, I've had many, many people tell me that, why does it matter? You're making videos for blind people. They probably can't appreciate any of that, or they don't notice any of that. Not that they don't appreciate it, but it's not that big of a deal. And it's like, yes, but I see it. I know it's not as good as it should be. And so I'm always trying to make things better. But I actually had a YouTube channel prior to this one that I currently have. Well, I worked with a guy based in Texas, and he made videos about Android phones and tablets, Android system, and modifying the systems. And so he needed somebody to take over his YouTube channel, long story short, and I applied for the job and got it. This was probably about 2010. And he taught me a ton about my phone, and so I wanted to give back and help others do the same thing. But I was bored. I needed a job. I needed to do something. I've always been a creative person, so I needed a bit of an outlet.
Yeah.
And this was something that I figured I could do in my home. I could adapt it to my own needs with my vision impairment and make it work for me. So I made videos for his channel for about 2 or 3 years, and that one got up to 10,000 subscribers, which back in the early, 2010, 2011 was kind of respectable. But then, long story short, also that channel kind of died. And so I had to find something else. And that's when I created my own channel. But I took that love of technology and continued on my own channel. And back then it was I was just making, I always say I was throwing darts at a board, and just whatever stuck, I would make a video about it. So it wasn't necessarily technology, but I did have technology sprinkled in there as well. So I've always had a love for it. And having done the channel for so long, having been on YouTube. I've been on YouTube for over a decade now, which is crazy to think about. But
Wow.
I've accumulated some really cool stuff. Most of I've purchased myself, once again, to the chagrin of my wife. But I've been also very fortunate that companies will send me stuff. So some of the equipment I use now, the professional equipment I use now, I was lucky enough to get from the companies. And I'm very thankful for that, so that I'm able to make the content better and improve the quality.
Yeah. It sounds like, like you said, you've been doing this a decade, and not only have you learned the tech behind creating the videos using cameras and microphones and computer software to edit your episodes, but you're also learning your TV personality per se, how you speak to your audience, what
Right.
How you want to sound natural, what topics that people want to hear, and things like that. And I'm sure through that decade, you've gotten better and better and better, and you kind of know what sticks and what doesn't. And it's, and I've been doing this podcast for a little over a year, and, I feel like in this 1 year of doing this, I've learned so much about what I prefer to say, what I feel like resonates with people. When I listen to myself, I don't cringe over, and
Right.
and I keep getting better and better, and it's kind of a rewarding process. Do you feel like that's kind of accurate for your experience too, doing this for over a decade?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just like creating anything creatively.
Yeah.
You eventually you develop your own style, and everybody starts out by mimicking other styles, and that's totally fine. You obviously don't want to just blatantly copy somebody's style, but you kind of cherry pick things from this creator and add them to your own, and then eventually you settle on your own style. I definitely have the way I make videos and the way I present on those videos, my on-screen persona, as you said.
Yeah.
Tell my wife, my family give me a hard time about that, but it is. You over time, you learn what works, what doesn't work. With YouTube, it's great. You can look at the analytics, and I'm assuming it's similar with podcasting, where you can see, what people are more engaged with, what types of content more people are engaging with more, and okay, I need to make that. This one only got, within the first hour, I only got about 200 views on this one versus the 1,000 views I might get on this other video.
Yeah.
So I know, okay, maybe they just don't really care about this type of content as much. And it's unfortunate that that's the kind of the way it is, because especially with YouTube, ideally you would want the freedom to just do whatever you want and be creative. And if I want to make a video about cats today, I can make a video about cats. And if I want to make some weird, stylistic black and white video where I'm not talking the whole, I can do that. Yeah. But if you're wanting to grow a channel and really build it into something on YouTube, you can't. You've got to narrow down your focus and pay attention to what works and what doesn't work, and trim the fat, kill your darlings, as they say in the editing world.
Yep.
And focus on what works. And but as you said, over time, you kind of get a sixth sense about these things.
Yeah, you do. And it only comes with experience. So if anyone out there is listening and they're on the fence about starting, whether it's a podcast or a YouTube channel, the only way to know if it's for you and if it's something you enjoy is to just start doing it. And the only way to get good at doing it is through doing it. So
right.
Just start it. That's my advice.
Yeah, that's what I tell people too. I get that question all the time. I want to start a YouTube channel, but whatever, insert reason why they haven't.
Yeah.
And I talk about that. The most important thing is to just get it going. And I tell people that, especially on YouTube, your first couple of videos are going to be terrible. Just accept it. They're going to be terrible. Nobody but your mom and your family is going to watch them. But you have to get those under your belt and just get some momentum going to get better at it. There's another YouTuber. His name's Juan. I give a little shout out, JC5 Productions on YouTube. He's another RP guy, and he's a filmmaker, actually, RP filmmaker out in California. But he he said once in one of his videos, he said, you don't have to be great to start, but you do have to start in order to be great.
Perfectly
And
said.
it's so,
yeah, I love that.
it's so true. Yeah. So that's my philosophy as well.
Yeah, I'll have to reach out to him for sure. Yeah, he sounds interesting.
Yeah, he's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's great advice. And, going back even deeper into your YouTube content, you also have some Q&As that you've done with your wife, which I found really cool, where you talk about dating, as someone who's visually impaired, being a father, someone visually impaired, parenting.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that kind of content?
Yeah, that was just, once again, born out of people requesting. I'm a member of a bunch of Facebook groups for low vision and Stargardt's in particular. And a lot of people talked about dating and a lot of parents actually of children who were recently diagnosed. That was kind of one of the questions is, are they going to be able to find love? Are they going to be able to date? That sort of thing. That also prompted me to make an entire video talking to parents of kids that are recently diagnosed and what to expect after a diagnosis. So, but my wife and I sat down, we made a whole series. Yeah. Couples Q&A is what it's called. And we talk about that. We talk about dating, how we met. We talk about marriage, living house life, doing the chores, who has to do what, driving. She's the only driver in the family, other than my kids, parenting, all of that. And those videos that series is pretty popular. I've also done two videos with my daughter talking about, and one video with my son talking about being the child of a visually impaired parent and what that was like growing up. They're still growing up, but and then I've also did a video with both of my nephews because my sister also has Stargardt's, and she has two sons also. So I did videos with them as well, talking about being the children of parents who are visually impaired and just getting their perspective on that topic. And those have been pretty popular as well. Yeah,
those perspectives to me are equally interesting. I've had several guests on my podcast where they're the parents of a child who was born blind. And it's a very unique perspective that I think deserves a seat at the table in terms of the conversation around the visually impaired community is the people who are there supporting the people in the visually impaired community. So,
right.
I think there's a lot of people in similar situations who are family members or spouses of someone who is visually impaired, and they have questions too, the same way we have questions. So It's neat to provide that type of information. So I respect that. Yeah. So what I've noticed is you kind of talked about it earlier. You said you have this kind of glass half full perspective, and that comes across in your YouTube channel. And it seems like that's what people appreciate about your content, is that it provides them kind of a sense of, not everything is so, dark. Not everything is like
right.
Life isn't over. You're still going to be able to live. And you talked about that also in your Beacon story that, things are going to be okay. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of want your perspective on that mindset.
Yeah, that's the motto of the channel, is that, as I said, it's trying to help people live their best blind lives. We're all visually impaired. Anybody out there who's visually impaired, how much it sucks. It sucks. There's no getting around it. We've been dealt a pretty crappy hand, and we just got to make the best of it. But as you said, I don't want to focus on the doom and gloom. I don't want to focus on the negatives. We all know the negatives. Nobody wants to turn on a YouTube video and watch a YouTube video for 10 minutes hearing about how horrible it is to be blind.
Yeah.
We know it. So let's talk about the good stuff. Let's talk about the positive stuff. I've got a video on, the top 3 things I love about being visually impaired. And, that's also why I show a lot of tips and tricks and how-tos, to help people navigate the frustrations of being visually impaired. It's kind of an escape. They can come on my channel and forget about life for a while, as the song says, and learn, some really cool stuff. But the other thing is I try to look at the blind life with a sense of humor. I'm kind of, at heart, I'm a really sarcastic person. I grew up in the 80s. If you were a kid in the 80s, then your second language is sarcasm.
My My sister would agree with you.
Yeah. So I have a whole series, in fact, on my channel. It's kind of an older series. I really need to update it, but it's called Why It Sucks to Be Blind. And it's like one episode might be reason number 36, why it sucks to be blind. And it will be, for example, here in my neighborhood, we have these Bradford pear trees, all lining the street, and they're big, beautiful trees. And in the springtime, they flower, and it's gorgeous. They have big white flowers. So during that week or so, the whole neighborhood is just gorgeous. The whole city, really, they're all over the place. But the problem is they stink like rotten fish.
Oh, wow.
And so, which, it's to attract the bugs and pollinate and all that. I get it. But for a visually impaired person, the reason why it sucks to be blind is I can't appreciate how beautiful these trees are, but I can probably smell them worse than anybody, because of my heightened super sense of smelling, as they say. Yeah. So it's like that. It's like, let's look at the ridiculous. Okay, this is ridiculous. I can't see how beautiful they are, but I can sure smell how much they stink. Another one of my videos, I talk about playing the low vision lottery, where and we as people with low vision, we play the low vision lottery every single day, several times a day. One of which is you're meeting somebody's picking you up, and they're out there waiting in the car, and you walk out, and there may be 6 cars there. It's like, okay, I've got to play the low vision lottery. Which one do I walk up to? Am I going to win or am I going to lose? And I have lost before. And I'm sure a lot of people have that story where I've gotten into the car and it was the wrong car, and the person starts freaking out, and I'm like profusely apologizing. I'm sorry. I'm not really here to kill you. I'm sorry. I just got the wrong car. So in that case, I lost the lottery. But in the video, I do this whole little skit about I have pets, and if anybody that has pets, especially cats, maybe you know that feeling of walking through your living room and seeing something on the floor, and you're not 100% sure what it is. You can get down close and investigate, but do you want to? Do you want to reach out and touch it? Because it may just be a cat toy, but it may be something nasty that I don't want to touch. Yeah. So you have to play the low vision lottery, and you have to roll the dice and reach down and touch it, and hope you win in that situation. So that's one of those. It's just one of those ridiculous situations. It's like let's bring light to this, and let's all sit around and laugh at how ridiculous this is.
Yeah, humor is to me my favorite way of relaying information to people, and I love what you're doing there. I think that's hilarious, calling it the lottery. Yeah, and it's very relatable, and a lot of your content is relatable. So again, go check out Sam's YouTube channel, The Blind Life. I'll have a link in the bio. I also have a link to his website, theblindlife.net, and you can also follow Sam on social media. His handle is at The Blind Life Sam. Sam, I know you're a busy man, but I like to end my podcast episodes with I let my guests do a shout out to a organization, could be a nonprofit that they think benefits the disability community. And I was wondering if you had something in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, Lance, thank you so much for having me. Happy to come back anytime. But there's so many great organizations out there. I will have to shout out the place where I work, actually, because perfect. Anybody making a donation will help out our consumers, but it also help with my job security. And that is the Bluegrass Council of the Blind in Lexington, Kentucky.
Okay. And what do they do?
Well, we're a low vision center. I'm in charge of the Assistive Technology program, where I do assistive technology training and demonstrations, and then we have a peer support program. So we are a small low vision center here in Central Kentucky, but we're actually one of the only ones in all of Kentucky that provide these services for the community. And anybody that works with nonprofits knows how difficult it is to continue to get funding each year. So it's such an important organization that any little bit of help will be greatly appreciated. And people can reach us at our website, www.bcbky.org.
Perfect. And I will have a link to that website in the show description. So if you're listening and you want to help out Sam's organization, just click that link, and there you can learn more about it, and you can also donate. Both are great. And Well, I think, Sam, I know you got things to do, but yeah, I think that concludes our talk today, and I'll have to take you up on that offer. Whenever I have my video channel running, I'm going to have you back on.
Yes, definitely.
Thanks so much for your time today, Sam, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you.
My pleasure, man. Me too.
Take care. And that's a wrap for episode 43 featuring Sam Seavey. What a chill and down-to-earth guy. And I'm so glad I was able to link up and chat with him. And I hope you enjoyed what we talked about. And like I said during the episode, if you want to check out all the organizations and YouTube channels that were mentioned in the episode, just click the show description and I'll have several helpful links there that will direct you to where you want to go. But before this episode ends, I just want to remind you that the See-Through Podcast is on social media. The handle is @SeeThroughPod. Give us a follow. I think I post some pretty cool content on there, so you'll want to check that out. I just had a really cool video come out that was released from Foundation Fighting Blindness. It was a beacon story about me and this podcast. Definitely go check that out. And if you're new to this podcast, don't just stop with this episode. I have 42 others, so you have a lot of catching up to do. And I'll say it again, thanks so much for listening. I put an episode out every week, so make sure to tune back in. And until next episode, I have to say the phrase that I end every episode on, and that phrase is, stay transparent, everyone.